Welcome back to Rick's Scale Model Fix and a bit of a revamp. It's been a while since I've done one of these, so welcome back. Today I'm going to be taking a look at Magic Factory's A4M Skyhawk in 48 scale. So this is a new manufacture to me, so I picked this up. I was quite intrigued. The box art looked pretty good and the kit looks to be well detailed. And whilst I've got the old Hasegawa kit in the stash, it's a little bit basic in today's terms. So this kit from Magic Factory was released in 2024. Pick it up from most major online model stores such as Jadlam. I picked this one up at the recent Bolton show for a nice price from the Crafting Well. So I'll put the link in the description below for that one. But before we lift the lid and take a look at the build, I'm just going to stop for a second and ask the question, what do you do when you start your build? So do you just lift the lid, get the instructions out and dive straight in? And there's nothing wrong with that if that's the way you want to go. Or do you take it a little bit further and have a look through the instructions and have a mind's eye view of what you want from your build? So with this one, I've decided that I want to do a different version, a later version in fact, from the box top artwork. So I want to do the one in the tactical paint scheme. I've got some quite old 2-bobs decals that were destined to go on the Hasegawa A4M, but times have changed and technology's rolled on. So we have things now like 3D printed decals for cockpits and things. So it's worth having a look at those as well and see where we go with the planning. So the presentation is first class, a nice glossy big deep box, and we've got some marking options included in the kit. So we've got a rather bizarre half and half scheme and the box top one and diamond backs, both attractive and printed, as you can see there, by Cartograph. Box is quite sturdy. We've got some drop tanks and Zuni rockets, Mark 82s and Mark 81 Snake Eyes, and we've got some codes there for the relevant manufacturer pages, social media. So we've got things like Facebook there, Twitter, and as I said in the intro, I picked this one up from our good friends of the channel, the Crafting Well. Pay their website a visit, it's well worth a look. Lifting the lid on the kit, and I have been through this because, as I was just touching in the intro, I have planned the build, but presentation is first class. So we've got 1:1 scale painting diagram there, both schemes. Colour call outs I noticed given for AK, Mr Colour and Tamiya. A rather hefty instruction booklet, so we'll take a look at that as we go through the build. Decals printed by Cartograph. I'm sure we don't need to say any more. Got some instruments that look quite well though, and we'll have a look at those as we go through the build. Advertising for it's either a pilot or it's a revision of the instructions if you're going to use a pilot. And then we've got the plastic, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, fuselage, sides, set of canopy masks. I don't know if they're die cut. I also noticed in there's a metal pitot tube, and we've got some etch details. We've got a little bag of ball bearings, nose weight. I don't know if the camera will pick those up with them being reflective, but we've got 5 rear view mirrors type of things, and some rubber wheels. We'll have to investigate whether they're going to be any good. We've got some other bits and pieces on there, but perhaps we can get hold of some resin or 3D printed ones. So taking a look through the instructions, as I've already done so, I have an idea in my mind what I'm going to do with the kit. And like we said, we've got some old 2-bob decals in the stash, so we're going to press these into service. So these are the schemes I had in mind. So I think we're going to start off with this one. So that's April 1985 A4M from VMA 311 Top Cats in the grey tactical paint scheme. And these have been around a bit now, so I don't even know if they're in production anymore, but we have 2 sheets there, so we've got plans. I think there's other manufacturers out there that have done equally as good decal sheets. I think Furball did one as well, or something like that. As I touched on the intro, we have now things like 3D decals, and these are Quinta Studio ones. Now what I did when I ordered these was I couldn't decide on whether I was going to do an early or a late. So the difference being a heads-up display in the later airframe, I believe. So what I did is I picked up the early set without the heads-up display from Quinta, and simply the instrument panel from Edard in their look set, which also gives us some seat belts, but so does Quinta, so we'll see how they go. And then I can swap between the two if I change my mind about the options in the kit. So as I keep referring to, I have plans for this kit, and just simply diving into the instructions with a kit of this complexity might be a little bit foolish, to say the least. So we've had a look through at some of the build sequences, and it's a very modular sort of construction. As we can see from those fuselage halves, we've got all sorts of gaps and panels. So I'm thinking here that it might be a good idea to build up the 2 fuselage sections first, complete with the intakes and everything. We have to decide, and we have to follow through the assembly sequences with which version we're going to do, either the late or early, and that's referenced on the box top, so not to get confused. There is not 2 kits in the box, it's 2 in 1, late or early. We have some sort of engine detail, and this is focused on by making the access side panels in the fuselage open, so you'll be able to see through there. Intakes are multi-part pieces, so again I'm favouring let's build up the fuselage halves completely before we start. As you can see, we've got the nose section that can be opened and displayed. So again, we're going to test the fit of this once we've got the fuselage together, and we'll make a decision and a judgment call on whether we have the nose open or closed. I think, looking at the detail as you go through the instruction book, if you want the nose closed, it's not designed to be closed, so there might be issues there. So again, dry fit. Intake shells going on here as well with the intake lips. Again, they're multi-part, so we're not going to have any issues with things like ejector pins hopefully showing through. But again, let's just hope the fit is good. Now, I've not seen any of these in any magazines. There is a couple of YouTube videos up on there, and how can I say this without sort of sounding, they're not the best of builds that I've seen, but again, research shows you what problem areas that you could encounter and how to correct those, or think, well, I'm going to have problems with these, and the intakes do seem to be one of those areas that need attention. And on one of the video builds I saw it left quite a big seam joint line that could have perhaps been remedied a little bit better. So we'll bear that in mind, so when I go through I'll question mark these areas just to remind me to check the fit. Wings look pretty straightforward. Rear end and different lumps and bumps, making sure you follow the instructions through for the version that you're building, early and late, because they are different. Tail, all moving tailplane by the looks of it. Whether that'll actually work or not, we'll see. More rudders and different fin tops and things like that coming into play here. Avionics hump on the spine, major feature of the M and the E or the F as well. Flaps and bits and pieces look like they employ a tab system where you cut off one and stick the other one on. Kinetic use that, I think Tamiya have as well. Hinges, bits and pieces, pretty straightforward build. Undercarriage looks straightforward. So these wheels are going to be 2 hubs, centre section with that rubber tyre. So I think we might look at using other media for that. Wings all look straightforward, speed brakes open or closed, and then we're on to that nose section, which looks quite well detailed, providing it all works as advertised. We've got open access panels and everything, so if that's your want, it looks quite interesting with the nose open. Whether I'll do it with the nose open, I'm undecided. I suppose it's a shame really that they've included all that detail if you do close the nose, but it's quite interesting in the way it opens and then the nose opens again. Pylons, weaponry, nice little touch I've just noticed there. We have a crew access ladder and intake blanks, and the canopy can be posed open or closed, and we do have canopy masks and mirrors. So overall, as it being a brand new manufacture to me, one that I've never seen before, it's quite promising, and we'll have a look at the plastic as well just before we start. But for now, I'll go back and have a look through that instruction booklet. I'll make myself a cup of coffee and make some pointers. So catch me in a sec. So I've got the coffee there now. So I've had a good detailed look at through these instructions, and we're going to start assembly with stage 3. So I am going to go down the route of preparing each fuselage half first. And there's a few little notes to make. So if you want the little bit of engine detail that Magic Factory provide in the kit, and you want to be able to see that, then you need to drill 2 holes in these locations as marked in the instructions, and that allows the door and the fuselage to be posed open. Depending on what version, late or early, that you're also doing, you need to open some holes. So at the rear of the fuselage there, and that's for that fairing that's underneath the tail on the later aircraft, and also there's one to open at the nose, and all the measurements are given in millimeters there, so get your drill bits ready. So moving on from there, I decided to dry fit some of the parts and start with B1, which is the starboard side, and as you can see, everything looks to have gone together quite well. Sidewall detail on the cockpit is really good, and there's just some of the other internal details. So that door frame is quite well detailed if you want to pose it open. Now, one thing I did notice with the plastic, it is quite soft and reacts quite quickly to Tamiya extra thin, but hopefully everything's gone together reasonably well. I've left this intake lip off because it is a good fit, and that will just simply push on at the end of the build. So if you're doing a scheme where this part is painted red, that's ideal because that'll eliminate any tricky masking for you. Detail on the plastic I don't think we've touched on. It's riveted. Mixed opinions at the moment. I want to see what it looks like when we've got some primer on. And we have just down each fuselage side a very thin mould line. I don't know if you can, the camera will pick that out, but it's basically at this point. That's going to quickly disappear with a swipe of a sanding sponge, and it is on both sides of the airframe, so it's just where the moulding's been together. Initial fit of the fuselage is promising. It's got quite large pins and socket location, just like that. Bit fiddly trying to do it for the camera, but it does go together reasonably well, he says. There we go. So I wouldn't be too worried about any seam at this point, but it does want to spring out a little bit there. That'll be covered by the avionics hump, so we're not too bothered. And the tail's a separate section as well. We've got posable speed brakes, and they can be open or closed. I haven't done any work on this side yet, but as you can see, the speed brake bay has gone in quite well there from the back. Whilst I was waiting for those to dry, I picked up at stage 4 and we've got a few little sub-assemblies together. So this is the engine section that Magic Factory supply, and that's what can be seen through those side fuselage access panels. We also started to look at other assemblies. So this is the bell intake with the fan down at the bottom, and there is a little part that goes in there to make up a little bit of detail. Not that you're going to see much through those intakes, just make sure you get this the right way round. It should sit inside this opening, and it had me confused for a little while because I couldn't get it to sit in the hole properly like this. I don't know if you can see, but when I turned it over and we got it in perfectly, it went through the slot at the back. If you don't do that, it affects the fit of this part at U36, which sits in the front section like so. So these need painting. Other highlights is the ejector seat, which is probably about as good as you're going to get in plastic. So that was built up, and that's it. That's progress up to date. So I'm going to just break the airbrush out and do some painting. I'm going to look at building up that other fuselage section. So just off camera, I've been doing some of these smaller parts while we waited for the glue to dry. So we've assembled that jet exhaust. Simple 3-part affair: nozzle, centre section and fan at the back. And that slots into place with a simple slot and key in the rear fuselage. Whenever I add anything to any fuselage sides like this, I always do a test fit just to make sure we've not induced any poor fit. And as you can see, the seam line on the bottom of there is virtually unrecognisable, so that bodes well. At the other end of the jet, we've now painted up that bell housing and the jet compressor face and added the centre section. And we're just going to simply now glue the remainder of the pieces together, and we're going to set those aside to dry. And again, a test fit. So this locates into the rails here. Slides in perfectly, makes a nice seam on the inside. I don't know if the camera will pick that up. And again, we're just going to test fit. And it doesn't want to push the fuselage out in any way, shape or form. And we've got a nice fit there. So with those set aside to dry, we can turn our attention to start building up the port side. And to that effect, we've got some of the items here. So your single blade cutters are going to be a godsend here, or god hands. The plastic is quite thin, so we're just going to remove what little remains of the attachment points. So like we said, plastic's quite soft and it reacts well, or a bit too well, I found, with Tamiya extra thin. So just use that glue sparingly, otherwise you could start distorting the surface of the model as well, and we don't want to do that. So air brake bay going in. and I'm just letting that glue run round. I'm not putting too much in there, but obviously I don't want it to get into a position where it'll fall inside the completed model, because that would be a disaster. So there we have the air brake bay in situ. So I just noticed we had an ejector pin there, and that needs removing. That was just causing the part to sit proud, and now we have a perfect fit. So we'll just glue that in place. Just making sure that we get a nice joint along this cockpit sill. It's going to be really visible in this area on the completed model. So that's in. And then we've got the framework for the access door. Now I'm going to have both mine closed. I'm going to think about putting the intake blanks on and having everything closed up on this one with some remove before flight tags. So again, we're just going to glue that in place. Like so. Make sure nothing oozes out on the front. Now I can't see anything that's going to affect the fit of the fuselage halves that we've just added, but to save any nightmares later. And this is especially important with today's tooled kits that have copious amounts of surface detail, because if you have to start doing some serious remedial work, you're going to create a whole world of pain in terms of scribing, replacing rivet detail, etc, etc. So all's looking good so far. Backtracking now until stage 2 of the cockpit assembly, and I've assembled the basic cockpit tub, and detail here is magnificent, even down to the quilting effects, and as we've seen on the side walls of the fuselage halves. Magic Factory thoughtfully give the modeler 2 sets of instrumentation panels. So the front one we've got with the hood, and you've got it with moulded in details or plain, and as they supply decals, I'm assuming that this is to aid decal application, but this will play right into our field where we want to use those Quinta Studios cockpit decals and the Edard look set. They're just going to be drop-in replacements. So they're there. So that was all put to one side for painting. The cockpit tub then sits on top of the undercarriage bay, or the nose gear roof if you like, and detail here again is absolutely superb, and it's made up of a number of parts, and I've just given that a coat of white primer just so that we can crack on and start getting this together. So this all needs sort of assembling and priming. So I've set aside the parts there for painting. So we've got the cockpit tub, the 2 side consoles, the rear part, the back bulkhead, and that lovely ejector seat. The cushions are still on the spring. I'll add those and paint them a different couple of shades of green later on. So for the primer, I'm going to use MRP Fine Surface Grey. I'm going to shake this up and get that on, and then we'll come back to the bench and see how everything goes together. So once all the paint had dried on that cockpit, we have now progressed to the first proper dry fit of all the internal parts. So thinking ahead, I've added very roughly the Edhard Look instrument bezel. Just added the cockpit coaming and the canopy, because the last thing we want to do is progress with this build and then get to the stage where we find that the canopy doesn't fit. So that's all in order. So it's just a case now of breaking this back down, just taking the tape off and finishing the cockpit, and that seems to be a good point to break this part of the video. So join me in build stage 2, where we look at completing and detailing the cockpit and getting these fuselage halves permanently joined together. So until then, look after yourselves, stay well and take care.